Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming back this week. So this is our second session of our pasture prep series. And today we're focusing on nutrition and grazing through the season. Just like last week, we do want to encourage you to submit your questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you're having any sort of technical issues or need assistance with anything, definitely drop those in the chat for us. And we are recording today's session, and again, are going to make this recording along with any of the materials we talk about and the slides that we present available to you in that box folder, which hopefully you did get already sent to you once, but if you haven't gotten that, we will also be sending that again. And as a reminder, we have a few more sessions after this one, so hopefully you'll continue to come back and find value in those sessions as well. Today, you get to deal with myself, Alicia Durinke, and Betsy Hicks as your presenters. We are both regional dairy management specialists, and I am on the Southwest New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops team, and Betsy is on the South Central New York Dairy and Field Crops program. So some things that we're going to cover today are what your cow needs nutritionally versus what your pasture actually provides. We're going to walk through several different diet examples, specifically looking at different points in the season and in the year. And then we're also going to talk about some different tools to help you succeed with your pasture and grazing endeavors. So we want to kick today off with a poll question. And the question that we want to ask is, sorry, let me go ahead and get this launched. Okay, so we want to know what species of animals are you grazing? And you can select all that applies. So dairy cows and heifers, sheep, beef cattle, goats, llamas, horses, chickens. And then we also want to know how long have you been grazing? So around a year, less than 5 years, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20 years, or 20 plus years. Oh, wow.
These, I'm really glad you guys are responding, because these poll questions, as we go through, will help us dial into what you guys want to hear about. I am so happy that even though there's some people grazing things other than dairy cows or heifers, that you're here today, so we can, honestly, I don't know anything about chickens, but I'm glad you're here. And a lot of the nutrition topics, you know, there's things we can use that we can go cross species to help track what we're doing with nutrition and what we're doing with grazing. So glad you're here.
Let me go ahead and share those results. So yeah, it looks like a majority of people are grazing either dairy or beef cattle, a fair number of sheep and goats, and then a little bit of chickens on pastures, and then quite the range of length of time in terms of how long you've been grazing.
Yeah, so I'm the people that have been here for more than 10 years. Thank you. And we want to like pull in from your experience as well, because that's a lot. So if there's any point that you guys want to add to the discussion or pop something in the chat, like Alicia said, feel free to. We're going to be monitoring that. And we really want open discussion as we go through this, because that's how we get the most out of this, right? Is we tell what you guys want to hear. Not what you want to hear, but we dip on the topics you guys want to hear about. How does that sound? All right.
Okay. So let me switch back to the PowerPoint. So to kick things off, we know that our cows, or if you're not grazing cows, our animals have a certain level of nutritional needs, and that our pasture provides some sort of nutrients, but we want to make sure that we're considering how those two things match up and how they match up throughout the year. So in terms of what our animals need nutritionally, oftentimes their diet consists of things such as energy, fiber, protein, fat, minerals, micronutrients, etc. All things that you've probably heard before, right? And they use these nutritional components to support their growth, their reproduction, their milk production, or their meat or egg production if you're looking at those species. And our pasture can provide a lot of these different nutrients and aspects, but we want to make sure that we're considering that these nutrients and what's available changes throughout the season and throughout the year based on a variety of different factors. So one of the factors that can change is based on what plants are available in your pasture. So looking at these three pictures, you can see that it looks like there's some different plants available in each picture. So the middle one probably has a fair number of weeds in it. The one on the left is maybe a mix of some different clovers, a little bit of weeds, and then maybe some grass. And then the one on the far right looks pretty grassy. And all of those different plant types are going to provide different nutrient levels for our animals. So we want to make sure we're taking that into consideration when we are formulating the diets that are not going to be fed in the pasture. And we're also going to see that the nutrient value changes throughout the year as we see the pasture grow, as well as the weather that we experience throughout the season. That's going to heavily influence the nutrient levels that are in our pastures, as well as how much forage is actually out there. We talked a lot about regrowth in pastures last week, so I'm sure it's not surprising to you that we're going to see the nutritional level change based on what is available throughout the season. And with that, Betsy is going to walk us through a bunch of different diet examples. But first, we do have another poll question where we want to know if you feed corn silage to your animals, and then also if you adjust your diet throughout the grazing season. And I will get this poll launched.
So yeah, well, we're getting the questions answered in the poll. So I want to know if you feed corn silage throughout the next, 30 slides or whatever. We're going to be looking at several different diets. And I did incorporate in the examples diets with and without corn silage. But I want to know which ones to focus more on in terms of what the audience has. So if the audience, so far we have 2 that have never fed corn silage. So we'll see what the other 7 say. And then adjusting the diet through the grazing season. I'm curious to see how people view grazing and changing the diet in the barn. So keep getting these answers rolling in. And as soon as we've got most everybody, we'll close it.
We can go ahead and end it for us and share those results.
All right, so we look like a pretty even split between yes, there's 3 yeses and 3 no nevers. So that's good because I have diets for both. So we're gonna go over both of them. It's nice when I don't have to waste slides. That's great. And then secondly, do you adjust your diet throughout the grazing season? Looks like yes, about 1 to 2 times per season is the most response. I didn't see anybody that says no, so that's great. We're all on the same page that we need to adjust our diets. So that's great. We're going to walk through some of these diet examples as the nutrients change in our pasture. So, all right, we can share that, and I'm going to do our fancy technical thing where I take control of Alicia's computer. We practiced. All right. Slight delay. Let's see if she moves. All right, great. We are off and running. All right, so for our model cow, this is what we're going to be looking at as we go through these examples. So our model cow, we are using a 1,550 pound Holstein cow. She is 80 days in milk, and we are targeting 75 pounds of 4.0 fat and 3.1 protein. And we are targeting that 56 pounds of dry matter intake. In the winter time or the non-grazing season, this model cow is housed in a tie stall. So this is our model cow. We're going to be using this model cow throughout the grazing season in the examples. So first, we are going to look at some diets with corn silage. And there's a few keynotes that I'm going to talk about with these diets. So number one, these are overly simplified. I do not suggest you feed these diets. I don't want you to feed these diets, but I want you to think about what the point we're trying to make throughout these things are, okay? Secondly, the cornmeal is separate in this model farm. The protein mix in our diet is shown separately just so we can see changes, but we're going to assume it's actually one mix on farm. And in that mix, the mineral and vitamin is also included. It's not shown in our examples, but we're going to assume that it's included and balanced. Not that they're not important, but for examples, they're not important. So this diet that I have on the left here, the ingredients are a fairly typical diet for farms that I might see that are in a tie stall situation or a smaller farm situation. They're feeding forage 50-50 corn silage to grass silage perhaps, and we have a total of 17 pounds of grain mix going into the diet. We also feed 2 pounds of dry hay per day. So our total dry matter intake is 56 pounds for this diet. So that's our ingredient side. On our nutrient side, the diet we're feeding is about 70% forage. It's 4.4 on fat, and our protein numbers are 16.5 crude protein, 10.5 rumen degradable protein. And then our our carbohydrate numbers are there at the bottom. Sugar, starch, and fermentable fiber are shown. As a nutritionist, I like to add those three numbers together. So in this diet, we're at 56.9. So this diet, when we look at the outcomes we get, number one, if I am doing this diet, I might want my ME and my MP, my metabolizable energy and my metabolizable protein. I would want them more closely together, especially if I am formulating a diet for a very specific group. For this example, however, this is like a one group, but it's all different parts of lactation. So this is a diet that is actually pretty common in a smaller herd because we're not wanting to underfeed our high producers, but we're also not wanting to overfeed our low producers. So in this diet, we're at 114 of our energy requirements, which supports 90 pounds of milk. And our protein requirements were at 105, which is supporting 80 pounds of milk. The last thing in this box that I want to talk about, we're going to look at this scenario throughout all the diets. So you'll see all of the diets matching this layout. The last thing is the income over purchase feed cost. And so we're using the lower supported milk, that 80 pounds, and we're saying milk is worth $18 a hundredweight. So our milk income is $14.40. Our purchase feed costs for this diet are $2.07. So when we subtract the purchase feed costs from our milk income, we get $12.34 income over purchase feed cost. If you can remember all the numbers as we go through, great, but you don't need to because I've got slides at the end that show all the corn silage diets together and all of the non-corn silage diets together. Hopefully I didn't go too fast, but we'll have several examples to work through as we go through. So that's our winter or non-grazing diet with corn silage. We're going to look at our non-grazing diet without corn silage next, if it will come up. All right. So here is our non-grazing diet without corn silage. And so we see no corn silage in this diet. It's all grass silage. And again, we're hitting 17 pounds of grain.
Sorry, I think I hit something.
You're okay. I might have tapped twice. So most of this grain mix is actually cornmeal because we have to pull in an energy source, right? Because we don't have corn silage in the mix. And so we have even amounts of soybean meal, canola, and distillers, similar to what we had in the first, and that 2 pounds of dry hay. So again, that 56 pounds of intake. And I see Mary Kate popped a question in the chat. What is included in the purchased feed? Are forages considered purchased or produced by the farm? Forages are considered not purchased. They're produced by the farm. No farm business questions here, Mary Kate. We're not doing that today. All right. So this is really slow. I might have to have you do I'm going to give up control, Alicia, just so it flows. All right. I just want to make sure where we are. I apologize, people. Okay, so now our nutrient levels, we are at the same 70% forage. The fat is 4/6 in this diet. Our protein levels are a little bit higher at 1711. They're a little bit high for my taste, but this is what we're doing. And then the addition of our carbohydrate numbers is at that 55. So our milk outcomes, following the same layout here, our milk outcomes, ME gives us 86 pounds of supported milk, and our MP gives us 75 pounds of supported milk. So when we work through our income over purchase feed cost example, we see at the end of the day, in this non-corn silage diet in the barn, we're at 1167 income over purchase feed cost. This is okay. All right, so moving on to our cow now that we've hit pasture. So in my area, this might be May 10th-ish. Last year, it was still snowing on May 10th, so it was more like May 15th. And so the difference, our model cow is the same cow, but in this situation, this cow is rotationally grazed. We're going to factor in 5,000 feet of distance walked per day because pastures are a 1/4 mile. So it's about a mile walk that she has to do a day if she's milked 2X. So early grazing, we're only going to factor in about 15% of her dry matter intake from pasture. So when we look at her diet ingredients, so we're keeping about the same amount of corn silage in the diet, but we're now moving some of that grass silage over to the pasture. We're replacing that silage with pasture grazing. And you can see we've adjusted our grain mix a little bit. We've bumped up our cornmeal because again, we want to bring in more energy and dilute out some of that protein from the really good grazing. And we've got even amounts of soy, canola, and distillers in there. And you can see I did double our dry hay. We went up to 4 pounds of dry hay instead of just 2, but still at that 56 pounds of intake. So when we look at the nutrient levels, forage is still at 70% of the diet, and our fat number is about the same. Our crude protein, RDP, are about the same, and our carbohydrate numbers actually went up a little bit. They went up about 2 points. I don't like to see my carbohydrate numbers jump more than that or drop more than that, but it's good to keep in mind. And so for our ME and MP, we're now supporting 92 pounds of ME and about 84 of MP. So for our income over purchase feed costs, so now we're using that 84 pounds. And so we've got $15.12 of milk income. Our diet costs got a little bit less expensive because we're using more of that cornmeal, which is less expensive than our protein mix. And so our income over purchase feed costs is $13.29 in this example. That's great. We went up when we hit grazing, as it should, right? We want to graze because it's profitable. So now the diet without corn silage. So we're including that 15% of our diet dry matter as pasture. We just moved it from our grass silage in the barn to our pasture. And again, we bumped up our cornmeal because we want to bring in energy. And it's the same protein mix, just less of it, right? It's still in the same ratio, but it's less protein mix. And our dry hay again is up to 4 pounds, still balancing for that 56 pounds of intake. Nutrient levels, we're still at that 69, 70% forage. Fat's a little bit higher, which is fine. Protein and RDP are again a little bit higher than I like, but that's where it is. And we did get a little bit more carbohydrate in this example than in our winter diet. So we're at 56.6. Great. So our milk outcomes, we're now supporting 88 pounds of ME and 79 pounds of MP. So in this example, we jumped up a lot on our income over feed costs. We're now at 12 income over purchase feed costs. We're at $12.55. This is awesome when we hit pasture in this diet without corn silage. We're really driving some milk income here. So looking now, we're going to switch to a diet. Our model cow is now on Lush pasture. So same cow, same pasture system. And now we're doing lush grazing. So we want to adjust for half of her dry matter intake from grazing. So let's look at the corn silage diet first. So corn silage is about the same as what it was in the diet, but you can see now half of her intake, half of that 56 pounds is in pasture. And, you know, we could keep some grass silage in, but I don't know about you, to feed 4 pounds of dry matter intake out of a bag to 50 cows, that you can't really keep it fresh. So that's why in this situation, there is no haylage in the diet or grass silage. We're just moving it all to pasture. But we do have that 4 pounds of dry hay in the mix still. So in this situation, we've actually dropped our corn meal a lot and our total grain a lot. So we're only at 7 pounds of grain in this situation. So let's see what the nutrients look like. So nutrient levels, we're now at almost 88% forage. That's awesome, right? It's always great when we don't have to feed expensive grain in the barn. Our fat is a little low, especially for high producing lactating cows. So I would like to address that if this was a real diet. And crude protein and RDP are pretty darn high for me still, but it might be a realistic diet. And then our 3 carbohydrate numbers are adding up to 56.7. So we're very similar to the last 2 diets with corn silage. When we look at milk outcomes, our energy is supporting 87.5 pounds of milk, and our metabolizable protein is at about 79 pounds. So when we do our income over purchase feed cost, our purchase feed cost went down a lot, right? We're only feeding 7 pounds of grain, and a lot of it is cornmeal, which is rather inexpensive. So we only have 80 cents of purchase feed cost. So this is the best scenario for our corn silage diets, right? We're at $13.43 income over purchase feed costs. That's great. Let's look now at the diets without corn silage when we're in lush grazing. So this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, right? And this is where we have to think about when we're going to adjust diets. We've been making incremental changes, right? A little bit less grain, but keeping the same protein mix. We can make it work, right? It's been looking okay. But this diet, I want you to really pay attention to what our nutrient levels are, especially. So this diet, again, no corn silage. We've got 17 pounds of our grass silage in. We're pulling half of our dry matter intake from pasture. And again, we've got this 7 pounds of grain in. 4 of it is cornmeal and 3 is our protein blend. And again, 4 pounds of dry hay, still balancing for that 56 pounds. Nutrient levels, again, we're at 87% forage. Awesome, it's a great place to be. Our fat is above 4, that's great. I'm much more comfortable on the fat level there. But our crude protein and our degradable protein are super, super high right there, 19 and 13. That's like really, really high. And then when we add up our carbohydrate numbers, those 3 numbers are only at 52. So that's like 4 points difference. That's a big jump. And I especially want to look at this starch number. We're at 7. It is really tough to make milk when starch is that low. Yeah, we're pulling in a lot of sugar and a lot of fermentable fiber, but it's really, really difficult to make milk when starch is that low. There's just not enough fermentable carbohydrate in the rumen to really drive production. So when we look at the outcomes here, yeah, our ME and our MP look really balanced at 104 and 103, about 79 pounds of milk, 78. And our income over purchase feed cost looks pretty darn good, right? We're still, purchase feed costs are really low, 80 cents. And so income over purchase feed cost looks great at 13.25. But so I ask, why would we want to change this? So we're hitting requirements, why improve? So the diet is super out of balance with protein and energy. In this situation, your MUNs, your milk urea nitrogen, is likely sky high, like 16, 18, it's really, really high. And when MUNs are that high, she is using the energy she has to get rid of excess nitrogen. It's showing up in her urine, it's showing up in her saliva, it's showing up, she's recycling as much as she can through the rumen, but there's just so much extra nitrogen that she has to use energy to get rid of it in all those other manners. So A, it's not great for the cow. B, we can save money on protein costs, right? Because we're still purchasing protein. So we can save money on protein costs. And lastly, we can get way better results if we reformulate the diet. So this is a situation when we hit lush grazing, we can't use the same diet that we use in the wintertime. We can't use the same protein mix, especially if you don't have corn silage. We need to reformulate. So let's look at this improved diet. So again, half of our dry matter intakes coming from pasture. Our grass silage is in the same amount we had in the last diet. So we're adjusting the grain mix. So in this example, we're mostly cornmeal. We want to pull in that energy source. It is still important to have a protein source that we're feeding to feed the bugs, to do some bypass protein. Soy is a good choice for that. In this example, I only have it in at 1/2 pound. So we'll see what that looks like. And again, we're filling it out with 4 pounds of dry hay. So looking at nutrient levels, again, we're at 86-ish forage percent. Great. Our fat is about 4. It's over 4. That's good. Our protein and RDP, they've corrected down some. That's much better than the 19 and 13 we were at. And then addition of the 3 carbohydrate numbers, we're up above 55. Still not great where it was before, but it's better. And our starch at least is in double digits. So this is an improved diet from where we were. When we look at our milk outcomes, so now we're supporting almost 85 pounds of energy, and on protein, we're supporting about 80 pounds. So looking at our income over purchase feed costs, in this example, we're generating $14.40 of milk income. Our purchase feed costs are 70 cents because it's mostly cornmeal. And at the end of the day, we're at $13.70 income over purchase feed costs. This is the best example so far. Not bad for fictional diets. So those are like our normal progression through this season, right? We've talked about winter, early, and lush grazing. So now I want to talk about, I added these slides after last week because we had some questions about mature grazing and why it might not be great if you're trying to make milk off of a mature grazing situation where it's seed heads. So here's our model cow. And so same rotational pasture system, she's walking 5,000 feet. But in this scenario, pastures are ahead of us. There's mature seed heads and very tall grasses. So here's our diet. We're still trying to generate half of our dry matter intake from pasture. We're not feeding any haylage in the barn. We're feeding 17 pounds of corn silage. And we've got our 4 pounds of cornmeal and 3 pounds of protein mix and 4 pounds of dry hay. So the diet looks the same as what it did in the lush grazing, right? It looks exactly the same. The only difference is the nutrient value of the pasture. So when we look at the nutrient levels, okay, we're at that 88 forage, it's a great place to be, right? But now let's look at our nutrients below that. Our fat, 3.7, it was 3.8. Okay, we know it needs to be adjusted. Crude protein and RDP, those are really, really low now, right? And okay, but our carbohydrate numbers look okay. We're at 57. That's not a bad place to be. So why is this so bad? So our ME, okay, great. We're got a lot of energy supported milk. We're at 84 pounds. but our metabolizable energy is only at 70 pounds. So when we do our analysis for income over purchased feed costs, we're only at 1190. So this diet, yeah, you can support 70 pounds of milk, but it's not the same, right? So this diet should also be looked at. And the last example I wanted to look at is our model cow on sparse pasture. So last week we talked a bit about how the fall was pretty hard. And if you grazed your pasture down and then grazed it again after it had a chance to regrow, but not fully regrow, what damage could you be doing to those pastures? So I wanted to look at that situation. We could also talk about it that it's like a conventional grazing system where you just toss them out there and it's good until it's not, or that it's an overgrazed pasture, or we ran out of a good feed situation, which might be this year as well for some farms because it was a tough 2020. So we're going to look through the diets with this example. So here's our sparse grazing diet. In this situation, we ran out of corn silage because we ran out of haylage a long time ago. So now we had to run through our corn silage inventory as well. So we do have that grass silage. We've got 20 pounds of that. And pasture, we're trying to get them to graze 10 pounds of intake from the pasture. We're feeding cornmeal because it's cheap. And I have 8, 9, 10, 11 pounds of grain in the diet. And we have a lot of crappy hay. So there's 8 pounds of crappy dry hay in the diet as well. But the thing that we'll notice about this situation is, oh, I totally forgot one thing. Let me back up. In this scenario, this cow has to travel a lot to get her intake. So we're factoring in 10,000 feet walk per day, twice as much as what she was before. So this cow is really looking to eat. She really has to look to find something to eat. So that's one of the main points about this diet, right? She has to walk a lot. So when we put that model in and we plug in all of these ingredients, the model only gives us that she can eat 49 pounds. That's really bad, right? That's like 7 pounds difference from our model cow that was only walking 5,000. So doubling her distance traveled in a day really affects like how much she can eat. So problems with this diet, the dry matter intake is only 49 pounds. It's a low pasture intake, right? We've got a lot of pasture. We want to make it be as useful as we can, but we can only get 10 pounds. So that's a problem for me. And then another problem in the diet is there's a lot of this poor dry hay in it because that's all we have. And then the 11 pounds of grain, you can look at it on your farm if it's a problem or not. In this situation, I think it's a problem because we're not supporting the nutrient requirements that she needs. So her nutrients, her forage percent in the diet is 77, okay. Fats at 4.2, okay. Protein and RDP is okay. And sugar, starch, and fermentable fiber, the addition of those three, about 56, okay. Like these numbers look okay, right? They're not like earth-shattering, they're not awesome, they're just okay. When we look at our outcomes, however, we're not even hitting any of the requirements for ME or MP. We're at 73.5 pounds of energy and only 57.5 pounds of metabolizable protein. So that's like a really dire situation, right? And unfortunately, it's a reality on some farms when they run out of feed. It's like a really bad situation, but it happens. So when we look at that 58 pounds of supported milk, we're only at $10.44 of milk income. And our purchase feed cost, because we're only feeding 11 pounds of grain, is really low. It's $1.12. But when we put the two together, our income over purchase feed cost is only $9.33. It's like a really bad situation. It's really tough to cover the rest of your bills when you only have that much left over. So just to cover a little bit more about this diet, the model itself, because she's walking so much, it only predicts 49 pounds of intake, regardless of whether I put in that 8 pounds of crappy dry hay or not. She can only eat 49 pounds because she is using all of her energy and all of her time walking to find something to eat. And don't forget, walking is also energy that she is expending that she can't use to make milk. In addition to that, It's poor pasture. So poor pasture has less nutrients, right? She just, whenever she eats, it's already less nutrient dense than in that lush pasture or early pasture situation. And even though the diet nutrient levels on a percent look okay, we're not hitting ME or MP. And we have to think about this diet in total pounds of nutrients as well. So those percents look great at 56 pounds, but at 49 pounds, we're not hitting it. So her limitation is the system she's in. There's two things we can do. We can improve her pasture situation, or we can find better feed for her, but we can't expect her to make 80 pounds of milk in that situation because it's just not going to happen. So I just wanted to toss these diets up together so you can see it. So these are the corn silage diets. So we've got winter, that's the non-grazing diet, early, lush, and then the mature grazing there at the end. And that's our income over purchased feed costs in the yellow and our purchased feed costs in the gray. And then our line is the percent forage. So winter and early, we're at 70% forage. And then lush and mature in the diets we went to, we were at about 88. And you can see our income over purchased feed cost was the best in our lush grazing diet. Because mostly we were feeding far less grain and we had really low purchase feed cost. With those diets, we've got our ME and MP. And so there's our winter, early, lush, and mature. And so you can see our ME in the yellow and our MP in the gray for those diets as well. This is just so you can see the comparison. There's, just so we had a concluding slide to show them all together. And really the discrepancy here in the mature diet of 84 to 70 on the MP side. In the non-corn silage diets, here's our winter, early, lush, our improved lush diet, and then our sparse pasture diet. Income over purchase feed costs is in the blue, and our purchase feed costs is in the gray. And so you can see again, 70% forage early on, 87, 86 forage later. Even with our 77% forage diet later, we're still really low income over purchase feed costs in that sparse diet. So those are our comparison charts. You can see those. And then our ME and MP. ME for winter, early, lush, lush improved. And then sparse, I forgot to change this one. The sparse MP was 58. So I didn't adjust the scale. That's why you can't see it off the charts, really low. So there's our diets there comparatively. So if you have questions about these diets, feel free to reach out to me and give scenarios, but we have plenty of time for discussion today. Pop your questions into the chat as we go. So that's it for the really boring diet stuff. It's a lot to take in. I'm going to turn it back to Alicia, and she's going to talk some more about MUNs and milk components and all of those things. So I look forward to your questions on that stuff.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, so as Betsy said, let's go ahead and switch directions a little bit, looking at another form of outcome-based measures, specifically milk components and why you should care about them and why you should track them if you're not doing so already. So we do have a poll question, and we want to know if you currently track your milk components. And I'm going to go ahead and get that launched, and you can respond that you track your components every week or more frequently. You track them once a month. You track them a few times a year. No, you're not currently tracking them, or your grazing species doesn't produce saleable milk, so therefore you're not tracking them.
Or milk in general for the chickens.
Yeah, okay. That too. Okay, give it another minute or so. Okay. Okay, so it does look like there is one person that does it every week or more frequently. One person tracks once a month. A couple people don't track them, and then also a couple people, milk components don't apply to their grazing species. Which for folks that it doesn't apply, totally fair, but maybe try to think about, is there an outcome-based measure that you could track that would help you better understand how your management system is working. Okay, let me get those out of the way. Okay, so when we're thinking about components, you might be asking yourself, why do we actually care about these? And when we're talking about components, we're talking about things such as butterfat, milk protein, and MUNs, which, as Betsy said, is milk urea nitrogen. And we care about these values and these numbers because in terms of butterfat and protein, they can potentially produce a premium in your milk check, which if you're grazing and maybe you're sacrificing a little bit of that milk yield, having those higher butterfat and protein numbers and getting that premium in your milk check can be really beneficial to optimizing your income, right? And then we care about MUNs because they can give you a picture of your protein status in your cow, and really give you a better understanding of how you are doing nutritionally with your cows. And then also, as Betsy kind of talked about already, MUNs can influence your environmental measures and how much nitrogen is being excreted into the environment from your herd, which, especially if you have a CAFO farm, you might get hounded on a little bit, right? So we care about these for quite a few different reasons. And there are some target goals that we want to hit for these numbers. So for true protein, typically your herd, you want to aim for between 3 and 4%. For milk butter fat, you want to hit 4%. And then typical MUN values that you want to see are between 10 and 12 milligrams. And I do want to add the caveat that first, the values that a milk cooperative is going to pay you for is totally dependent on each individual cooperative. So if you are specifically aiming to hit a goal that will pay out and give you a premium in your milk check, you want to check with them and confirm that you're setting the right target goals. And then also in some years like 2020 and 2021, where the milk markets are kind of all over the place, these numbers might kind of go out the window a little bit and things will get a little wonky. So these are kind of blanket goals, but you might need to tailor them and adjust them throughout the year or across different years. And when we're thinking specifically about the MUNs, there are a variety of factors that can influence your MUN value in your herd. So those can be influenced by breed, the number of times that you're milking your cows per day, the amount of protein in your diet, the month of the year, as we'll typically see higher values in summer, the time of feeding relative to milking, and the time of day. And so knowing that all of these factors can influence your herd's MUN level, it makes it really important for you to know what your herd normal values are, and then also be able to look for and identify when those values change, specifically within your herd. Because your MUN values might not be identical and highly likely won't be identical to your neighbor or your buddy down the road or anything like that. So it's important for you to track these on your individual farm and look for variation. And when you're looking for variability within your MUN values, it can help you identify any sort of area for concern and alert you to if you maybe need to reevaluate your diet and what you're feeding out. So when you're looking for changes within your MUN levels that maybe are reason for concern, you're going to want to look to see if your MUN levels are really high. So typically we're thinking in the range of 12 to 14 for that MUN value is possibly an indicator that it's high. But then also more specifically, if you're looking within your herd for change, if you see a change greater than 2 to 3 points in your MUN value, then that is a good indicator that you might need to reevaluate either your diet or some other management change that you've made recently. And of course, when you're looking for changes and comparing your values within your herd, it's always better to have more values and more measures, right? Because it's going to be more precise in how things are changing. Because if you think back to a couple of slides ago, right, we're going to see a lot of variability based on a ton of different factors, time of day, etc. So if you're only looking at these MUN values a couple of times a year or even once a month, it's probably actually not that good of an indicator for you. So if possible, you do want to try and look at these on a pretty regular basis. And the more frequently that you can look at these numbers, it's going to give you more precise information and alert you to changes that are happening within your cows more proactively as opposed to reactively. It's always going to be a little bit reactive, right? Because it's still, unfortunately, an outcome-based measure, and we're not knowing that ahead of time. But the more frequently you can look at that and identify and change sooner, the better. So then when we're thinking about, what affects milk components on a whole, so thinking about also not just your MUNs, but thinking about the protein and the fat percent, there's a lot of different factors that can influence that as well, which probably isn't surprising to any of you, right? But I do want to draw your attention to 3 key factors that I've highlighted here that Betsy's kind of already talked us through in our diets, right? So some major things that we're going to see affect our milk component numbers pretty heavily are dry matter intake, the amount of concentrate fed, as well as potentially corn silage. So if you're not hitting your target component goals, you might want to take a look at these 3 areas to start with, and then work your way from there if you're struggling with reaching your goals. And of course, in order to know what your goals are and if you're hitting them or not, then tracking your components is key to this. And you can track your components in whatever way works best for you. Each farm is different, each management system is different. You have to do what you're actually going to do, right? So if you know that you're not going to use a computer and you're not going to track something on there, then don't do it. Use paper and pen or whatever you're most comfortable with. And there are a lot of easy ways for you to track your components. So you can track them by adding them to the bottom of your grazing chart, which we'll show a little bit of an example of later. You can plot them on paper or in an Excel to create some sort of graph. You should be able to track them in Dairy Comp or some other milk softwares, or just track them in a notebook or Excel, whatever works best for you, to make sure that you're actually looking at those more regularly. So the next thing that we want to cover is actually looking at an example of calculating your components. So likely you know that butter, fat, and protein are both paid out on a $1 per pound basis. And when you get your milk check at the end of the month, which hopefully you can see this example here, your milk check probably looks somewhat similar. You're going to get your numbers that are the total pounds of milk that you've produced that month. And then you're also going to see your butter, fat, and your protein that you sold. And that they are going to give you that information on a percent basis. So in this example here, we can see that the total amount produced was 71,319 pounds, and then the butter fat was 3.8, and the protein was 3.1%. but this is on a monthly basis, right? So if we really want to get detailed and be able to better identify when things are changing, we can actually calculate our component values on a daily basis. So in order to do that, you're going to take your total pounds of milk sold per month. So if we're using that example that example milk check we just saw, they had 71,319 pounds. And you're going to divide that by 30 days because there was 30 days in the month, right? So that gives you the information that your daily pickup was 2,377 pounds. And we're going to go ahead and just assume that this milk check was for a farm that has 40 cows, and each of those cows is producing 59 pounds of milk per cow. So if we want to know how much of those components are coming from each individual cow, we can take our butter fat percent, so 3.8, and add our protein percent, 3.1, which is going to give us 6.9%. And we're doing this in decimals because we want our math to work out right. And so we're going to take that total butter fat and protein percent and multiply it by 59 pounds because that's how much we're getting per cow, right? And that's going to tell us that we are producing 4.07 pounds of components for every cow every day on our farm. And this is important for you to look at and track because you can identify when things are changing and use it to know when your pastures are producing the components that you want, or if you made a management change or a diet change that's not working or is working well, then you want to keep doing that, right? Or change it if it's not working well. And you can get this information more frequently than monthly by talking to your milk cooperative. Most cooperatives have an online system that you can log into and look at each pickup, and you can calculate it from there. So shifting gears a little bit, that's probably a lot of overwhelming information, right? But there are tools available for you to be successful with your diet and making the milk components that you want. So first, of course, your nutritionist is a really good place to start. If you're working with a nutritionist, if not, maybe whoever you're getting nutrition advice from, work with them. Your nutritionist is important because they can help you identify changes, especially if you're having good communication with them, which is ideal. Either they can help identify changes in your herd that maybe are occurring because of a diet change, or you can communicate with them that you're noticing XYZ change, and you know that they just reformulated the diet. Having that communication can allow you to correct anything that might be going wrong, and also continue anything that is going positively. And your nutritionist can help make sure that you're adjusting your diet throughout the season, as we just highlighted, is really important, right? Another tool to help you be successful on your farm is scales. And scales are important because they help you make sure and identify that you're actually feeding what you think you're feeding, right? So if you went through all this work and all this effort with either you did it or your nutritionist did it of formulating a diet, you want to make sure that your cows are actually getting the diet you think they are. And so using a scale can help make sure that you're actually feeding the amount of feed that you think. And if you don't have a scale that you're using frequently, at the very least, if you're changing your grain mix, you want to make sure that you are adjusting and re-weighing, tongue twister. If you are changing your grain mix, you want to make sure that you're weighing a scoop of your new grain mix so that you can adjust how much you're feeding from there. So like, for example, if you feed with scoops of grain compared to pounds of grain, and you get a new grain mix, you want to make sure that you weigh out one new scoop of grain So that way, you know how much they're actually getting in their total diet. Another useful tool for you is to make sure that you're taking and monitoring inventories, which we do have some resources available for you in that resource folder to help with monitoring and tracking inventories. This is important because it allows you to plan for any sort of changes and be prepared for when you're going to run out of corn silage or when you're going to run out of haylage, and plan accordingly. Especially if you can't purchase in that new feed, and it's something that you want to feed, you want to be able to know when that's going to happen and not get caught scrambling to try to figure out, okay, what am I going to do to feed these cows? So taking your inventory frequently is really important so that you're not, come grazing time, forced to put them out on pasture, even though maybe your pasture is not ready. So, and then tracking components. Betsy is awesome holding up our green dairy grazing book. You can see that, tracking your components or tracking your milk yield can be super easy. It can be pen and paper. In this example that you're seeing here, this is daily milk production per cow. That is being plotted. And then along the bottom is all the different paddocks that this farm is using. So, 1, 2, 3, those are all different paddocks. And then the different values on the side are the milk production that they're getting per cow. So you can see that as they move throughout the paddocks, this farm is seeing where their milk production is changing. And you can account for that in your management and potentially adjust for that in what you're feeding in the barn, right? So we know that maybe it looks like pasture 4, maybe you're always going to get consistently less milk production. So you can try to compensate for that in the barn. And that book example also provides several other management tracking tools, which I just want to highlight because, of course, whenever you can track more things and track more management changes, that's going to give you more information. That's going to help you be more precise in terms of what is causing either a positive or a negative change on your farm. And we mentioned that you can add your components to your grazing chart, but grazing charts are also just a really good tool. I know some of you said last week that you're using them. We did add the one that Troy talked about last week into the resource folder. So lots of good things can be tracked in your grazing chart. And again, it's just another management tool so that you know what's happening on your farm and how you need to adjust accordingly. So Betsy and I threw a lot of information at you. So just a couple of wrap-up points before we get to the Q&A. We want to highlight that what the pasture provides does not typically match what your animal needs. Farms should look at their outcome-based measures frequently and adjust their diet as needed. And this includes based on the pasture availability and nutritional changes that occur throughout the year. Monitoring milk components is a tool that farms can use to understand the success of their management system and their current program. And there are lots of already pre-existing resources and tools available for farms to help you reach your goals. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel or start from scratch. You can utilize the grazing charts, the green pasture book, managing inventories, etc. If you are newer to this, or if you feel like your system needs an update, since we know that some people have been doing this for more than 10 years. And with that, go ahead and throw your questions into the Q&A feature. Betsy and I's email is available here. If folks have additional follow-up questions later on, please feel free to reach out to us.
All right. We have some good questions. There's some in the chat, there's some in the Q&A. Do we want to start with forage analyses, software, or MUNs? Where do we want to start? All right, in the chat, Nancy had put in, do you suggest sampling the pastures for analysis regularly? So I know that some nutritionists do this, and that's great. It gives you, what that moment in time is. However, I want you to think about what the nutrient quantity in your pasture is as a proactive versus reactive. So we're taking a nutrient sample, we're sampling the pasture, sending it into a lab, getting either a NIR or a wet chem sample done on this, analysis done on this sample. And, it's going to be a day before we get it back. It's going to be, at least another day before the nutritionist gets back to you. So, by the time 3 days has passed, is this a reactive or is this a proactive approach? So yes, it's important to recognize what our pastures might look like in a certain stage of its life cycle. Remember last week, Sam talked about, 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. versus midnight versus 3 a.m., right? The different crazinesses that we might see. So it's important we recognize what the nutrient profile could look like in a sample. But I like Troy's more proactive approach, where we're going to go out and we're going to put our sticks out in the pasture, and we're going to monitor our growth. We're going to monitor how tall it is. We're going to monitor what that pasture looks like. I have said since I started grazing, you cannot see what your pasture looks like from the road. You have to walk out into it to see what it looks like. If you're judging from the road, you're already behind. You're not going to know. You have to get out there and see proactively what it looks like. And so we can use those samples we've taken in the past to help judge where we're going to be, but we have to get out and see what that pasture looks like. So it's not a perfectly black and white answer, Nancy, but you're a good grazer, so I know you know what I'm getting at. And your second question, what software do you use for rations? We work for Cornell, so I use the Cornell Net Carbohydrate and Protein System, CNCPS, for my diets. A lot of nutritionists use the AMTS software, which is based on CNCPS, which is perfectly fine. There's a lot of great software out there that different nutritionists may use. It's important to work with a nutritionist that knows what their software can do, and that they're using software to help balance diets. So those are the two I wanted to answer off the bat. Alicia, I'll let you grab a couple.
Yeah, so in the Q&A, is there a lower limit to MUNs that you want to look out for? Betsy and I actually just talked about this the other day. Typically, if you're at 8 or lower, that's something you want to look out for concerning wise. Maybe even if you're getting down into the 10 range, that could also be reason for concern, especially depending on what your normal herd average is.
And with that lower limit at 8, you're making the rumen work really, really efficiently, which isn't a bad thing if you are a really good grazer. If you can function and get the responses that you want from cows at an 8, awesome. I just caution people to balance on that low end if they're not good grazers or there is a lot of weather unpredictability, because if you get into a pasture situation where your protein amounts just nosedive and you don't have the ability to change what you're feeding in the barn, we can really limit cows on MP at that point, because we're not supporting the protein that she needs, and it's going to show up as an after effect in her MUN. So yeah, we can do it at 8, but you better be the best manager you can be at 8. I'm more comfortable around 10 because it gives us wiggle room on both sides.
Yeah, and following, or I guess not following up, but you started to hit on this one too, is what do the MUN values indicate in terms of cow health? And I think you started to really hit the nose on the head there, in terms of it's gonna tell us about what her rumen's doing, how efficient it is. Take it from there, yeah.
When we get really, really high, that's more of a cause for concern for me when she's at that really high end of the spectrum. She reproductively, there's issues that may come up. when hormones are super high. It's just really inefficient overall, right? It's the opposite end of the 8 is super efficient rumen. 14 is super inefficient because there's so much nitrogen out there. And now we're actually using energy to get rid of that protein. So it just puts her into a tailspin of really wonky stuff when it's super, super high. It's just not a good place to be for your pocket or for the cow's rumen. So there was, I think Nancy popped some more into the chat. Oh, Lance had one first. Are there toxic weeds in the area that disrupt animal health / milk production to watch out for? And is this a risk with using bad hay? So I am not a weed specialist. Are you a weed specialist?
I know there are some. I don't. Oh, Nancy just put a thing in the chat. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. That's generally what we do as extension people, is give you another resource. So check that out in the chat. Certainly there are toxic plants that we can graze that can be really harmful to cows. I do not pretend to be an expert on that at all. We can help ID them and give you resources to help look for them. But generally, there's a weed specialist I talked to in Texas that said, oh, horse nettle, no, doesn't matter how much they eat of it, it will never kill them. That's great. That's very reassuring. But in my example, I had talked about poor hay or bad hay, and that was in response to that sparse diet. And I just want to reiterate, even though I put it in the chat, that is like poor nutritional quality hay. So it's really low in sugar, really low in protein, really high in fiber, and really indigestible fiber. So that poor hay is like that hay that was cut in late July that looks like sticks. Usually there's a lot of that out there. It's not very good for making milk on. So that was for my reference there.
Yeah. And of course there is concern if you're not referring to like poor nutrient quality hay, if you're talking about like, potentially moldy hay, etc. That is, I'm sure, not surprising that it is an area for concern. So make sure that if you are talking about poor quality hay, that it's more of that nutrient value, not, I don't know what the right word is in terms of
storage quality, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So Nancy is tossing out great questions. So how do you estimate dry matter intake from pastures? So Troy is the perfect one to have asked this question to last week. Troy works through, has a worksheet that he works with new grazers on that we'll actually pop that worksheet into the resource folder again. You can estimate, if you get really good, you can estimate by eye how much dry matter intake your pastures can provide. I'm not that great at it yet. I'm getting better. It takes time. I'm certain those people that have grazed 10, 15, 20 plus years are far better at than I am. What I don't want to see is that you estimate what your pasture can provide by saying, oh, I guess they're really hungry in the barn today. That's a really reactive thing, right? We want to be more proactive. So if you stink at knowing what your pasture provides, call a grazing consultant, call Troy, call somebody within your soil and water conservation district or NRCS that can come out and help you get a better idea of that. There's a lot of resources, and that worksheet will pop into that folder as one of them. Anything else you want to add to that, Alicia?
Sounds like a good answer to me.
Great. Glad you liked it. Yeah, Pasture Walk is a great way to learn weed ID. Absolutely, Nancy. Thank you. So I don't see anything else in the Q&A. All right, so we actually have quite a bit of time. We wanted to walk you all through what is in the box folder in case you hadn't had a chance to look through it. And certainly if you have questions as we go through that box folder, feel free to pop them into the chat. We're gonna still monitor that. But Alicia's gonna share her screen when she's got that pulled up, and we'll show you all the resources that are in there.
Okay, so hopefully you all got this link emailed last week. Otherwise, we will be sure to email it out again. You'll probably get it like a million times before the end of this series, just to make sure that you all have access And if you do have trouble accessing the folder, please email us and we can make sure that we help get you access to that. So we're going to put all the resources in this folder based on the week. So last week was spring green up. This week is nutrition and grazing through the season. And then we are going to put all the unedited recordings of the presentations in this recordings folder. So going to this week, here is a PDF of the slides that Betsy and I presented today. And then if you click on that resource folder, we have a ton of different either articles that you can look at. I don't remember what the Word document is, but other resources for you to look at.
That Word document was a bunch of resources from Penn State on grazing topics that were useful. Yeah. So if you want to read some more, these are some that I pulled from Penn State that were great on. They talked about MUNs, they talked about supplementing, concentrate on pasture, supplementing fat to high producing dairy cows. A lot of topics that we couldn't dive deeper into today are in that Word document. The thing we just touched on was the inventory stuff. And before I started with Extension, there's a group that put together some of these inventory worksheets, and I adapted them to Excel because that's the way my brain works. And so basically these Excel sheets are based off of those inventory worksheets. And so I put together an article on how to use these back in October. I'll put the article in the resources folder as well. But basically, I don't want people to run out of feed and then scramble. So it's better to know when we're going to run out of feed and make adjustments rather than scrambling and say, oh, guess what? I ran out of corn silage today. That as a nutritionist stinks, as a cow stinks. So we want to avoid that. So basically, we look at the top on a whole herd level, lactating cows, dry cows, calves, and heifers less than a year and older than a year. All we need to do in this first one is punch in the number of animals in that category and the body weight on average for those group of cows. So after all these calculations, it does for you. At the end of the day, it tells you how many tons of forage, dry matter you need for the year or for that time period, which I used a year here, or per the day. So that's what this example is showing us here. And then we can do our inventory stuff by bunker. We can do it for tower silos as well. I can get you that stuff. Bales, round bales, ag bags. We can do whatever inventory you want. Gives us the total dry matter tons in inventory in that second chart. And then the days we need to feed. This is the key one. It's great to have over a year of inventory in the bunk or in the silo. It's rare that it happens that way. And so this scenario gives us, about 8 months, I think, of corn silage we need it to last, and haylage needs to last until like mid-July. And so then this final chart gives you, what is our diet, our milking diets, 50% corn silage, 50% haylage, and drops down through the other diets. And it tells you at the end of the day, is the amount of corn silage I have and how long I need it to last, is it okay? Same with the haylage, and do I have adequate forage overall to last in that time period? I can walk any of you through this inventory for your particular farm. It works for non-dairy cows as well. I use something similar for this for my beef cows. So we can walk through that situation for your farm if you'd like. Just reach out to me, email, cell phone, whatever. We can walk through it. And if you like pen and paper, we put those in the resources folder. So those are in the PDF ones as well. And then the component tracking spreadsheet right there, that I took that green pasture book that I held up earlier and I put that in an Excel spreadsheet because, like I said, that's how my brain works. So these are the exact examples that were in the presentation, and they made more sense to me this way. So this is how I did it. And if you're great at Excel and it's not 10 o'clock at night, you can make it into a graph. And I could not last night, so I went to bed. So this is an easier way to track for me that you can just plug in your numbers and see where you're going. I also put in there the paddock number, so you can track. It's interesting. I had a producer that grazed that said to me, okay, so is the grass that they're eating today, is that tomorrow's milk or the next day? And I said, that's a great question. I need to talk to Mike Van Amberger about that. So still have to answer that question, but at least we know at what point in time or which paddock we're in when we get that milk production. So there's another Excel tracking spreadsheet, and you have the green pasture book in the resources folder as well. Anything else interesting in that? I think that's about it. So, yep. And we did pop some more things in last week's resources thing from Troy and Sam, the questions they answered at the end. So there's a lot of good things in there. So, all right. If there's no more questions, next week, we are happy to host Don Burkhart with Cows Come First. Don is going to focus on incorporating annuals into your grazing system. And next week, he's going to talk more about forage samples, which we just touched on this week. Really didn't even talk about them this week because Don's really going to focus on them. We're going to talk about them next week. I'm sorry, you can probably hear my cat. You can. He's going to talk about forage samples and talk through incorporating those annuals into the diet. It's super great. He gave us a sneak peek of his presentation. So we're looking forward to great discussion, far less boring than this week, but this was a good basis for next week's discussion. So we hope you will join us then. Don grazes beef cows and dairy heifers, I believe, right? And he's a nutritionist for lots of dairy herds as well. So he brings a wealth of experience and knowledge. So we're super excited to have him on. Survey stuff, right? That's about it?
Yep.
Go for it.
So again, this week, the survey will pop up, or you will also get a link emailed to you. So that survey is specific to the session, and we want your feedback to make sure that we are providing information that's relevant and useful for you. And you only have to answer it once. If you get it popped up now and get an email, you don't have to answer it twice. But we do appreciate your feedback on each session, just so we know what you find most valuable throughout the series. And I think that's, am I forgetting something? Cool. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you next week again at noon. And it is the same Zoom link. So you can either keep it or it should get emailed to you again. Put it in your calendar, whatever works for you, but it will always be the same Zoom link. So. Yep.
Donette sends a follow-up or a pre-email every week. So make sure you add her to your safe senders because she's great. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.